1864 was also an election year in Nova Scotia. In fact, there having three in 1 year due to the divisiveness of Confederation. The first election in January included all the delegates from Nova Scotia who went to Charlottetown and Quebec conferences, so Dr. Charles Tupper was able to form an early government on his own. But Tupper, like most fans of Confederation, was extraordinarily aligned with the possibility of a Fenian invasion. To most people in Nova Scotia, it seemed about as remote as the idea of Confederation itself. But after nearly 30 years under Joseph Howe, the people of Nova Scotia were willing to put their trust in Dr. Charles Tupper. When Nova Scotia's delegation arrived at Quebec City, Tupper's newspaper went into overdrive with support for Confederation, and he said it was a great victory for Nova Scotians. Howe's newspaper was the main voice of Nova Scotia, as was the man behind it. Howe himself did not trust anybody outside of his immediate family to work in a newspaper shop for fear of having his offices burned to the ground by a mob, as happened in 1837. So this set the stage for the great battle of the second election of 1864 in Nova Scotia. The election as a whole was basically a referendum on Confederation, and whether or not Nova Scotia should join. In short, if you were for Dr. Tupper, or were you for Joseph Howe? Howe promised that Nova Scotia would stay out of Confederation, and that the Maritimes as a whole would be far better off that way. Howe saw the province of Upper and Lower Canada forcing both crippling and foolish provincial tariffs on the economies of the maritime provinces. They would also do so in such a way as to compromise the fact that Nova Scotia and New Brunswick had harbours that did not freeze in wintertime. In fact, the port of St. John, New Brunswick, and Halifax, Nova Scotia were completely ice-free even in the coldest days of the wintertime, whereas the ports in Quebec City, Montreal, and Toronto were all frozen most of the year, at least in the wintertime. Joseph Howard said so much about the uselessness of Confederation, which he called botheration. He also compared it to the Union of Scotland and Poland being more useful than Canadian Confederation would be Nova Scotia. Howe said that he would not be a Canadian with a beaver eating himself off a maple tree. But he had actually proposed a maritime union in 1837, in which the maritime provinces would be a similar union to that in the United States. However, that plan fell apart due to the American Civil War and the 1850s when they began to split, to see just how incredibly fragile a non-federal state can be at times. This is where all the power is given to individual states, not the federal government. Joseph Howe quickly realized this and abandoned his maritime union ideas. He said he spent 30 years as a railway building maniac with a singular obsession which approached to pure madness at times. In short, when it came to Confederation, Howe was offering tried, true, and tested policies, whereas Premier Tupper was offering the new idea of all Canadian Confederation of all British North America from coast to coast to coast, which had yet to be ratified by the British Parliament in London. As Howe said, if you vote for me, you can keep on being British and have the old Union Jack too. Tupper realized if British people realized British North America was to survive, there would have to be some kind of confederation, otherwise there would just be a constant push by the Americans for annexation. Tupper was also worked out the plan for what would become Canada Post. He was consistently frustrated by the fact that it took up to 6 weeks for lead to get from Halifax to Quebec City, Lower Canada, while it only took a week for that lead to get across the ocean from London, England, by the new invention of the steamship. Tupper also realized that they wanted to build a railway from Kingston to Halifax. Then they would need to have a proper political union in order to do it. Otherwise, it would never happen. But Tupper didn't quite know whether to support Macdonald and Cartier's idea of a transcontinental pan-Canadian railway system which would link the Atlantic to the Pacific and also connect the northern half of the North American continent with a railway. Tupper also knew that Macdonald wanted to complete a railway before the Americans could do so. Everyone knew the Canadian government would not be able to spend the money to fight their way west and also build a railway at the same time. The Americans had to fight and build their railway at the same time because they were pressuring anybody they could think of into joining the US via their expansionist Manifest Destiny policy. But of course, none of the international railway building nonsense appeared to be over Nova Scotia, so on the advice of Sir Samuel Tilly, Dr. Charles Tupper took a seat as a member of the legislature for Cumberland County, Nova Scotia, where the county borders New Brunswick. Cumberland County was the one place where Tupper's pro-Confederation party won a seat in the legislature. There was also a lot of support for the idea of Confederation in Cumberland County because he was born there too. but nowhere else in the province took the dubious idea of a new nation born out of Confederation. Now, Joseph Howe would have controlled the province of Nova Scotia, as once more he had 18 of the 19 seats in the legislature. In other words, Howe had about 95% of the people behind him when it came to not supporting Confederation. During his brief 2.5 months in office, Joseph Howe did two very surprising things. The first was to go to London, England, to ask for the standing British government's Commission on North America to stop Confederation from happening at all. Howe thought the Confederation a very bad thing for the smaller provinces like Nova Scotia and the rest of Atlantic Canada in general. During his trip, Howe was surprised to find that when he arrived in London, Tupper was also there, trying to persuade the same British Standing Commission of the benefits of Confederation for maritime provinces and British North America as a whole. During this time, Tupper and Howe were separately but formally presented to Her Majesty Queen Victoria at Windsor Castle, where she had been a widowed recluse since losing her late husband Albert in 1861. After they had talked about their different views in Confederation, Tupper and Howe agreed to privately return on the same ship to Halifax. It was during this trip that Howe was in a way publicly humiliated by Tupper by reason to his political arch rival. Ironically, Tupper was Howe's personal physician as well, for the two men needed each other when it came to being doctor and patient, but they otherwise hated each other as political rivals in the Legislative Assembly of Nova Scotia. By the way, Tupper returned to Nova Scotia somewhat wealthier after winning a game of shuffleboard to Howe. The other thing that Joseph Howe had to face during his 2.5 months in office was constant political splits, as old rivals in his own party began to come to the forefront. The situation was so bad that Howe, in order to gain some critical support politically, was forced to call a confidence vote, which he lost by 1 vote. He then had to go to the Lieutenant Governor of Scotia in order to resign as Premier, which, combined with a surprise visit by John Macdonald to Halifax in December 1864, forced Howe to give up his age-old anti-Confederation stance and take a softer, more balanced view of Confederation with regard to Nova Scotia joining Canada. The strange thing was that Joseph Howe then had to call an election, the third election in Nova Scotia in 1864. After a long, hard winter campaign, Howe worked himself to death and died of mental and physical exhaustion on January 1st, 1865. The same day he was in his deathbed, he said, "I want you to stand by Tupper, as you have stood by me." The ironic thing is, the election in December 1864 had been the reverse of the election of October 1864, with Dr. Charles Tupper as the Premier of Nova Scotia once more. Now, it was Tupper who had 18 of the 19 seats in the Nova Scotia House of Assembly. So after 3 elections in 1 year, Tupper and about 95% of Nova Scotians wanted to become Canadians under the British Crown. In other words, the people of Nova Scotia wanted Confederation, with Dr. Sir Charles Tupper as their leader. So it was with that settled that Nova Scotia entered Canadian Confederation on July 1st, 1867, along with the provinces of New Brunswick and Upper and Lower Canada. All four provinces now had to account to a federal parliament in Ottawa. The new capital, a Ottawa town, was personally chosen by Her Imperial Majesty Queen Victoria, forced members from the American border in the event of a war between Great Britain and the US. This never actually happened, largely due to Queen Victoria's personal involvement in all international as well as domestic policies. It also helped that John A. Macdonald became a personal friend of General Ulysses Grant, who became the President of the United States for 2 terms from 1870 to 1878. So everybody in British North America had a different view of Confederation in general. Newfoundland Ireland rejected Confederation wholeheartedly, as the politicians themselves found the idea to be in their favour. In the case of Canada's four original provinces of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Upper and Lower Canada, which at the time were also called the United Province of Canada, thus formed the new Dominion on July 1st, 1867.